Welcome back to the Anti-Meta Club. This week's race B is a pretty straightforward and simple Group 3 sprint at Watkins Glen, and I have a good anti-meta for you. Let's get into it. The anti-meta car of the week is the 2020 AMG. The M6 is dominant as usual at Watkins Glen, with the GTR not far behind and the Lexus kind of following back in third. I think the AMG and the RX Vision are probably your best bet beyond those, and there are a few other cars that do seem to work because Group 3 is actually pretty good right now. Taking a look at the leaderboard, you can see that the M6, as usual, is just incredible here. The Nismo and the Lexus are also very good, and I was able to get a 145.6, though I do think a 0.4 is probably possible with this car. I do believe it's the only AMG in the top 100 right now. There's also a McLaren as well as a BRZ. Starting off on the left side of the track, making sure you're not going to touch the grass whatsoever as you hit the brakes. You're going to wait to the 200 board, and you're going to hit the brakes heavily as soon as you get to it. Braking heavily down to second gear, turning in at the 100 board, you should keep a lot of brake pressure and start trail braking in after you've already started to turn into the corner. As soon as you've hit that apex, get on that throttle and make sure that you track yourself out as far as you can without going beyond the colored part of the curb. If you go beyond it, you will get a penalty. Make sure you rev this thing all the way out and use these curves. Make sure you ride all the way up on these curves because that gives you a little bit extra track, and with extra track, you can steer even less. As you can see, I'm just barely steering and I'm using as much of those curves as I possibly can. Making sure you rev it all the way out, you do not need to shift to 6th before you hit this first braking zone. Looking for the 300 board, you're not actually going to brake until you get past it. You're going to immediately turn in and trail brake, trying to get as close to this inside wall as you possibly can. As I go over the first curb, you're going to notice that I come off the brakes just slightly and continue steering to the right. As I make it over the curb and I hit the pavement again, I straighten out the wheel and add slightly more braking, then trail brake in to go over this next curb, just barely making sure that I stay within the confines of the white line. Once the car is settled on the pavement after the second curb, then I add throttle. You can see that I have to lift off and add it again to make sure that I don't understeer because I did get on the throttle a little bit too quickly. As I go over the final curb, I make sure that I switch directions so I get the weight to the left side of the car to make sure that it rotates over the curb and continues rotating after I've hit the pavement on the other side. After that curb, I want you to notice that I'm slowly coming off the throttle. If I do it too quickly, it can actually cause the car to understeer by transferring too much weight too quickly. Once I'm fully off the throttle, I want you to take note that this is the amount of brake pressure that I'm using as I downshift to third. You do not need a lot of brake pressure to get the car to continue tucking into the corner here. Gradually adding more steering as the car continues to decelerate, I try to apex just past this little access road right here, and then as soon as I do, I gently and fully get on the throttle. As usual with Gran Turismo 7, the white lines do indicate the track limits, but the curbing extends it. So if you go all the way on the curbing, as long as you come back in before the beginning of the white line, you should be fine. At the 200 board, you're going to start turning in gently and then brake as soon as you get to this little drainage ditch. Even though you're turning, you can actually get away with braking fully just briefly before then trail braking in and then downshifting to second to match the shape of the inside curb. You want to get fully on the throttle by the time you get to this cyclone fence here on the inside. As long as you're gentle on the throttle, the car should continue to rotate through the exit. You want to make sure that you're tracking out as much as you possibly can without letting your left tires go past this curb. And in fact, if your right tires go into the grass, it can also pull you into the wall, so you should be very careful there. Align yourself on the left and look for the 100 board here on the barrier. Right before that, probably about a full car length, you're going to dive in, smash the brakes down to second gear. You're going to trail brake just briefly before then coming entirely off and then turning in to continue the car decelerating. You want to get on the throttle to balance it out, using as much throttle as you can, and as you pass these marshals here on the left, you should then be at full throttle. As long as you add a little bit of throttle at a time, you should be able to get on full throttle before you get there, and then just purely accelerate all the way up the hill, making sure you use this little bit of concrete runoff and don't touch that grass. The next braking zone is the hardest on the track because there's no specific braking marker. What you can do is use the light here as it hits the grass, and the unfortunate thing is that that actually can move if you lap long enough. If you do like 20 laps here, the sun will change position, but as long as you restart or you do it in the first couple laps, it should be good. You can also just think that it's halfway between the 200 and the 100, so it's about 150, or you can just rely on your instincts because after a while, your instincts should serve you right here. Turn in right before the 100 board, dipping down to second gear after you started turning in, get up on this curb, and then immediately get on that throttle, but of course be very, very gentle. You want to let your steering go. You want to unwind it just a little bit because if you're still steering a lot as you hit this curb, it can very easily ruin your lap and make you spin out. I like to turn in just a little bit before the 100 and then add almost full brake, but not quite. You don't want to cause any understeer, but you do want to brake as much as you can while adding turning. Trail brake in, come off entirely before you hit the apex, turn in more, allow the car to settle as you get on the throttle, and then add full throttle once you start tracking out. There's a bit of a crest in the middle of that corner, so if you don't add throttle early enough, it can actually make you understeer. For the next corner, we're actually going to use 2 of the number boards. I want you to start turning in right after the 200 board, and once you get to the 100 board, then you're going to start gently lifting off the throttle to get the car to tuck in so you can get all the way up on this inside curb. Your goal is to lift off just enough to match the tire mark so you can apex and immediately get fully on the throttle, trying to track out as much as you can without letting your left tires go beyond that yellow line. Align yourself on the left as early as you can so you can steer as little as you can as you apply the brakes, and you're going to apply the brakes at the end of this part of the curb here. Staying in 4th gear initially as you turn in, you want to come off the brakes as early as you can, so dip down to 3rd gear to get it to rotate and decelerate a little bit more, get up on that curb, and then fully get on the throttle in 3rd gear as soon as you apex. If you did it all right, you should be able to track out all the way almost up to the wall and keep your right tires to the right of that white line, and then your lap is completely over. You shouldn't have to shift gear, but pay attention if you're going really fast out of there, you might hit the limiter. The first corner here is absolutely crucial, and I messed it up more times than I can count. My mistake was coming off the brakes too early. You want to use a lot of brake pressure, and in fact, even though this was a pretty good turn 1, I actually went a full 10th faster in my fastest attempt. I didn't slow down the breakdown when it came to this uphill section because I do think it's pretty straightforward, but feel free to ask in the comment section if you need to know exactly when to turn in. I think you should be able to copy it just by watching. It's important to be very brave in the bus stop, and what you should be focusing on is decelerating to a point where your slowest point is after the 2nd curb, and then you're immediately accelerating directly after that and staying on the throttle until you tuck it in for this right-hander. Make sure you use minimal brake because you're going really fast and trying to use a lot of steering. If you add too much brake to that, you're just going to understeer. It's going to ruin that entire section. It's hard to know exactly when to get on the throttle here because you can't actually see your exit by the time you should be on full throttle, so definitely try to use the inside of that curb or that corner, the cyclone fence that I pointed out, and it should help you. This corner is interesting because you don't need to use a lot of brakes to continue decelerating, and you should get on that throttle as early as you can without sliding the tires whatsoever. And I mean either the front or the rear. Once again, I hate using light as a reference because it will change, and in real life it would never be a reliable reference, but because conditions do stay the same in time trial and Gran Turismo, at least for the first few laps, you can use it reliably until your instincts take over. For this tight left-hander, you do have to use a little bit of throttle to get the car settled. You're not sliding the car to rotate it, you're essentially just getting the front tires to stop sliding as you're turning in. Just try to get the entire car settled so the car can continue turning. This final corner is really interesting. I've hit this wall so many times. You've got to make sure you don't use too much brake there. For whatever reason, it's really easy to brake too much, and that'll both kill your momentum as well as cause you to understeer into that wall. Since we once again have a race V as our focus for the week, that means that we do not have a pit or fuel strategy, but that does not mean we don't have any strategy whatsoever. As always, there are many things you can do to gain an advantage over your opponents, and of course, having good pace helps, but positioning, knowing your opponents' cars, all of those things make a big difference. The M6 is dominant here, like I've mentioned already in this guide, and if you've been driving this game for very long, then you probably know that Watkins Glen, the M6 is king. But it does have a few weaknesses. Actually, I should say it probably has one major weakness, and that is when it comes to the slower corners, it's pretty easy to get the rear end to kick out. So if you put someone in a position where they have to defend, or if you can make them pinch their line coming out of any of the tighter corners, you might be able to induce some oversteer, which of course, if they're good enough, they can save it and it'll just slow them down, but it can also cause some chaos. Speaking of knowing opponents and knowing cars, Damien, one of the fastest drivers in the entire world, our friend of the channel, is driving one of the weirdest cars in the class, a car that has been shoehorned in the Group 3 class and for whatever reason has a very old manual transmission, which means that the game tries to simulate the actual clutch in and shifting like a gated shifter, and that makes it very weird to drive. So it's got a lot of power, but it loses a lot of momentum every time it shifts. You probably won't have to face a lot of people driving that car, but it's just interesting to know all these things about the cars. It does not handle very well on top of the really weird momentum issues, but we've got literally one of the world's best Gran Turismo players driving it, and it has a lot of power, so you can expect some funny things to happen in this type of situation. One thing I like to always mention when it comes to a race B is since they're so short, people are going to be acting a little bit more desperate than in the race C. With a race C, you've got a lot of laps to try to figure out a longer strategy, but when it comes to a really short sprint, people are going to be defending as much as they possibly can, as well as attacking as much as they possibly can. This can and does cause a lot of chaos. So stay on your toes, keep your eyes open, and try to look as far ahead of yourself as you possibly can. I think you'll probably find, even in the top split like this, that there's going to be a lot of chaos, specifically in the bus stop, which is the super fast chicane after the end of the hill, which is after the first corner. And in these really slower corners and the end, there's going to be a lot of chaos here as well. This corner is really slippery for everyone, so the M6, with the issues that I mentioned before, is going to be extra slippery there. There is a bit of a skill difference in a lot of the different classes as well. You're going to find people who aren't quite as fast, especially through, I think, in my opinion, this last set of corners. And so a lot of people are going to hit the wall when they drive desperately, which is going to happen a lot in these fast races. And a lot of people are going to outbrake themselves. If you focus entirely on trying to get a really good exit for turn 1 and position yourself correctly, you can find a lot of success in passing people right there. As Damien was going for an inside move, it became pretty clear that he was going to be right next to that guy going into that corner, which meant that I could slip in right behind Damien, and that guy could not stop me without running into Damien or running into me. You may have noticed that I moved to the inside as well because our friend Slayers was behind, and I'm always going to try to help any of my friends who I'm racing with. This bus stop always causes issues because people can easily find themselves next to each other leading into it, and it's really hard to determine exactly how fast someone's going to take the corner, especially when they're on a different line. So it looked like Raphael braked a little bit earlier than Damien expected, despite the fact that Damien did brake at the 400 instead of the 300, which he usually would, and so that caused a little bit of a pile up, and I was able to take the position from both of the BMWs, but then Slayers took my position. The Genesis X behind Slayers also passed me, but then he went way too fast and actually ran into the back of Slayers, then understeering and almost going entirely off the track, so I took that position back. As you probably noticed, I was able to get myself really wide in the middle of the bus stop and then continue my momentum and immediately regain my line and regain composure. The AMG is really nimble, and it can be a little bit squirrely if you're not really used to it, but that squirreliness, the looseness, gives it more speed. I shouldn't say it gives it more speed. Essentially, a car that is looser, a car that's a little bit more dangerous, is usually dangerous because it can rotate better. And despite the fact that it can rotate really well, it's also really stable as long as you don't try to push it too far beyond its limits. Now, talking about actual strategy that you can employ, since I have two of my friends who are both very fast drivers, and they are right in front of me before the first corner, which means that they're going to be in front of me leading into the very long uphill straight-ish section. That means that I should do absolutely nothing to give them an issue, and then I could usually follow directly in their slipstream, and we'll all benefit as long as we work together. Unfortunately, they both had a little bit of a twin drift, and Slayers lost a lot of momentum there. I then turned into Slayers for absolutely no reason, because I just like to bother him. And then Damien provided slip for both of us, so I decided to see who was more brave in the bus stop. And I don't think Slayers was actually any less brave than me. I think he knew that we were both probably going to crash if we both tried to go through, and I think that he probably just didn't want to ruin my video. I bet he could probably have beaten me through that corner, but Slayers is a sweetheart. I love him, and unfortunately Damien got himself a penalty, which means that when I pass Slayers, I'm also going to pass Damien just after this next penalty zone. With a full 1 second penalty, that means Damien has to slam on the brakes for an entire second up this hill, and since we're very close to him, unfortunately he's going to end up being way behind us, probably stuck in the traffic. So we're going to go ahead and jump ahead to the next point where I actually have some action. Just a few corners later, and we get a yellow flag. So of course I'm curious to see what happened, and I can see Pace has been ghosted and is now directly in front of us. If you've been with me in these guides for a while, then you know I like to talk frequently about knowing your opponents as much as I talk about knowing the cars that you're racing against. Pace is actually someone that I've been racing against since GT Sport. He is a top split driver, and he's very fast. I believe that he qualified second in this race. I already apologized to Slayers for this. I checked up way too early just because I was hyper fixated on the back of Pace's car. So I kind of lost where I was, and I should not have checked up that much. Slayers, of course, wasn't mad because this is a daily and because he's a sweetheart, but if this were in a competitive race, I would have caused an accident right there. So luckily, this is just a daily. Anyways, Pace is very fast, and since he did qualify second in this race and he's in the meta car, the best thing that I could possibly do right now with just a lap and a half left is to try to push him for as long as I can until we approach another set of drivers, and then we can start battling trying to get past them. Alliances can be made and broken at the drop of a hat in these races, especially the really short ones, so he's going to be very aware that if I do push him, I'm only going to be working with him for as long as it will benefit me, and I will try to pass him as soon as I possibly can. Slayers is going to do the same thing. Slayers is probably just sitting there waiting for something to happen, and as soon as I see that he's approaching these next people, then I have to consider exactly what I'm going to do the next time that I get an opportunity to do anything. Not only can you actually go faster by teaming up with people than you could on your own, you can also use them to your advantage when it comes to passing other people. You've probably seen it when I passed the guy in turn 1 by following Damien, and if you've been watching me, I keep saying that, if you've been watching me for a while, you'll notice that I really like to push people and give people a bump draft and then follow them through as they pass other people. If you stick close enough to the bumper of someone who's passing another person, then that person can't possibly close the door without running into you. As long as you stay within a car length distance of the car in front of you who's passing someone, the person who's being passed can't actually stop you from following them through. With only 1 lap left, I'm not very close to Clubsport pace, but I do believe that if I nail this corner, I should be able to get close and possibly provide him with a bump draft, and that could potentially get us in front of or next to the people leading into the bus stop chicane. Obviously, none of this is a guarantee, but these are the things that I'm thinking about as I'm in the race. You've got to make sure that you're thinking about all the possible things that can happen in a race and be prepared to take advantage of anything that does happen. With Clubsport aggressively following and both of the guys ahead of him both defending, it's best to probably check up here because the chance of them colliding is pretty high, and if I put myself in the mix, then it's going to be even higher. So the best bet there is just to wait and see if anything happens, and if not, then I'm safe and I can continue to attack after that. I had already known this, but at this point it was pretty clear that Clubsport pace is going to be much faster than both of the drivers ahead, so there's going to be some action very soon. And as soon as I saw these two together, I was pretty certain that neither of them were going to make it through cleanly. As soon as I saw Johnston defend and take that inside line, I knew that he was going to run into Clubsport pace, so I took a really deep line into that corner, knowing that I could just focus on the exit speed, keep up my momentum, and exactly what I thought would happen did happen. I got a bit extra lucky here as my friend Jay had slowed down and Tyranno was not prepared for that, so he ran directly into Jay, and that slowed both of them down just enough. And when someone goes too slow in one of these slower corners, it's very easy for them to miscalculate how much throttle they need, and that's exactly what happened with Tyranno. Now, I do race against Tyranno a lot, and I do trust him, so I knew that I could trust him on the outside, and I knew I can get in front of him and brake very cleanly, not having to worry about him hitting me, and unfortunately, our friend Jay also got a penalty, and since it rounds up to the next second, I somehow managed to get all the way to 5th place at the very end, just by staying safe and positioning myself in a way that I could take advantage of any kind of craziness that happens, and a lot of craziness happens in these races. Thank you for watching my video. If you like what you saw, please don't forget to like and subscribe, and I'll be making another one of these guides next week. To finish off, I'm going to leave you with a look at my current members. I love every one of you. Thank you.